call from hell. The night of September 6th to 7th, 2010, something unbelievable happened. What it was and what it was connected to remains a mystery to me. That evening, only my mom and I were at home. My brother was staying at his girlfriend's place. My mom was still in the kitchen, and I went to bed around 11:30 p.m. but couldn't fall asleep for a long time. I woke up at 2 in the morning because the landline phone was ringing. It's loud in our house. It rang persistently for a long time, despite the late hour. Strangely enough, I didn't feel like picking up the phone, although usually it's done on reflex when half asleep. Moreover, the persistence of the caller scared me. I got up, ignored the call, and went back to bed with a clear conscience. After about 5 minutes, the ringing repeated. This time, it made me uncomfortable. My mom approached the phone and, surprisingly, also ignored the call, although she hadn't done that before. I tried to fall asleep again, but after a few minutes, while half asleep, I heard someone hit the kitchen window twice with a 1-second interval, very strongly, but not like if it were done with a fist or stick. I tried it later, the sound was completely different, as if someone was hitting the glass with their whole body. I asked my mom, who was half asleep, if she heard the same thing as I did. She confirmed that she did. Then I thought it might be some drunkards. We live on the ground floor of a standard 5-story brick building and went to the kitchen to check it out. But there was no one outside, and our 2 cats were very frightened by something. After checking the kitchen and going out onto the balcony, I found nothing unusual and went back to sleep. My mom and I were scared. We started reading prayers and tried to fall asleep again. We lay there, watching as the cats ran from one corner to another. It was scary. My mom got up, went to the icons, and started reading prayers. Then the phone rang for the 3rd time. I ignored the call and began to cross myself. I was shaking with fear, barely managing to utter the words, "Our Father." The time on the clock was somewhere around 2:30, and then 2 more powerful blows hit the kitchen window, even stronger and more persistent than before. I was trembling with fear. The prayers were difficult to read, and the cats seemed to be going crazy. After some time, I finally gathered the courage to go out onto the balcony. Naturally, there was no one outside. What it was and why it came, I don't know. My mom and I managed to fall asleep only after several hours, but I had never experienced such horror in my life. Later, the neighbors told me that our house was built on the site of a very old cemetery, and supposedly once every 10 years, those whose peace was disturbed come out at night and scare people. The return of Bloody Mary. My stepmother was a vile creature. I think all children whose fathers remarry feel this way, but in this case, it was true. She married my father only because he was wealthy, and she hated children. There were 3 of us, me, Maria, my middle brother Richard, and my younger brother Charlie. We were the price my stepmother Gertrude had to pay to become wealthy, and we would become the only obstacle between Gertrude and our father's inheritance when he died, and she took action against us. She sent my younger brother Charles to a boarding school far abroad. This school had a good reputation as an educational institution, but it was also known as a school with strict rules where troublemakers were sent. It was not a place where such a sensitive and delicate child like our Charlie would feel comfortable. He was unhappy there. But despite everything, Gertrude managed to get him there, and he could only come to us for holidays. When he came to us after the first year of study, he was pale and thin, with dark circles under his eyes like bruises. He cried. He really cried when my father said he had to go back to school. But father didn't listen to him. Gertrude believed that Charles would benefit from studying there, so Charles was sent to the boarding school. I did everything I could, wrote encouraging letters, and called him every day until Gertrude said it was too expensive and limited my calls to 5 minutes a month. I even asked my father to book me a ticket to Europe to visit Charles. Gertrude was furious when she found out about it. There was such coldness in her eyes that chills ran down my spine, and her mouth tightened, and her pink lips merged into a straight line, which didn't bode well for me because I dared to interfere with her plans. 2 days before my flight to Europe, we were called by the school and told that Charles had climbed to the top tower and jumped down. He died. Father, of course, was shocked, and Gertrude quietly celebrated her triumph. For a few months, father paid more attention to me and Richard since our mother died. But Gertrude was a very beautiful woman and soon found ways to distract father from us again. Now, with one of her hated stepchildren dead, she went after the next one. It was poor Richard. Richard was a healthy boy who was supposed to start school. He would have actually become a good athlete. He would have felt great at the boarding school that ruined Charles. So Gertrude sent him to study at an art school. He hated it, but Gertrude convinced my father that Richard had talent, and Richard's fate was sealed. My father didn't learn any lesson from what happened with Charles, but Richard was strong. He reluctantly learned to play the piano and violin, although he would have preferred to play football and rugby. But Gertrude was smarter. She introduced Richard to several boys from the senior classes who were everything Richard dreamed of: wealthy, popular, and played football. And they also dabbled in drugs. Gertrude realized that Richard was susceptible to outside influence and used this flaw, ensuring that Richard became more and more dependent on his new friends. This continued until Richard died of an overdose one day, leaving Gertrude with only one stepchild to achieve her coveted goal: me. I was sure that Gertrude knew that Richard had taken drugs that day in his room. She knew he was unwell and could die. If she had found him 10 minutes earlier, he might have survived. The doctor said so, and I believed him. But my father didn't believe me. He always got angry with me when I said anything against Gertrude and ordered me to keep quiet. But I still knew I was next, and I also knew that my father wouldn't live long after writing his will in favor of his wife. I decided that if Gertrude went too far, I would run away and hide with my aunt in New Jersey until I turned 18. After Richard's body was found dead in his room, I made myself behave like the most exemplary child. I always did all my homework on time. I was polite to Gertrude and all her friends. I accompanied Gertrude and my father everywhere, even if it was dangerous, like shark hunting. Don't worry. I made sure I got seasick, and I spent all my time in the cabin, not even thinking about approaching the edge of the yacht. Gertrude became more sophisticated in her tricks. Everyone believed that when I fell on the tracks in front of the oncoming train, it was just an accident. I managed to roll off the rails in time, but it was already too much. I was almost ready to run away when my father told me the terrible news. My aunt died suddenly overnight in New Jersey. She was poisoned by unknown persons. I was shaken, but I can confidently say that Gertrude greeted this news with a smile on her face. That evening, I went to my room, closed the door, and began to agonize over my thoughts. I could run away, but the money would quickly run out. I needed to finish school, or my chances of getting a good job would be zero. Besides, Gertrude would still pursue me anyway. If she could hire someone to poison my only relative, she could hire someone to kill me, whether I lived at home or not. I had only one way out. It was awful. A family secret passed down through generations on the female line. This secret was told to me by my mother. Many years ago, a witch named Bloody Mary tried to kill my great-great-grandmother and use her blood to stay forever young. She was stopped by the girl's father, my great-great-grandfather, at the very last moment, and the witch cursed him and everyone who burned her at the stake. The curse would come alive when someone involved in her death said her name in front of a mirror, awakening her vengeful spirit. Over the years, the story spread, first told in my ancestors' village, then known throughout the country. Nowadays, students scare themselves at parties by standing in front of a mirror in the dark, and nothing happens to them. So no one believes in this curse. Naturally, no one knows the whole truth about Bloody Mary. It was a secret passed down from generation to generation among the villagers many years ago. I was a direct descendant of the villagers of that village, and I knew how to summon the witch. You need to use a mirror that belongs to a direct descendant of one of the villagers who lived there during the time of Bloody Mary. The witch's name must be pronounced a certain number of times, by candlelight, in the native language of Bloody Mary. What I was about to do was horrible, and I knew it. But it was the only way to save my life, either Gertrude or me. If I just sat back and did nothing, I would perish. So I gathered all my hard-earned money and went to a specialized shop to buy handmade wax candles. They were all black. I carefully followed all my mother's instructions, placing the candles around, equidistant from each other in the living room, so they reflected in the large mirror above the sofa. Then I lit them one by one, reciting the incantation my mother had taught me. I waited. My father left home on a business trip, and Gertrude went to a party with her new lover. She came home late and started scolding me for not finishing my studies yet. Her voice was playful and light. I hated that voice. She seemed sweet and pleasant, but irritation shone through her words as she stared at the flickering black candles. "Conducting a séance, little Maria?" she asked, emphasizing the word little, knowing that I hated being called that. "I just like doing homework by candlelight. I pretended, flipping through the pages of my textbook. Gertrude frowned. You know, little Maria, I think it's time for us to have a serious talk, she said, approaching the mirror behind the sofa and adjusting her hair. Yes, I said softly. The time has come. You killed my brothers, and my aunt, but I won't let you kill me. Gertrude laughed. You don't stand a chance against me, she said, tossing her long blonde hair over her shoulders. I began to pronounce the name of Bloody Mary in the language of my ancestors. Once, twice, 3 times. Inside the mirror, Gertrude's image disappeared in flames, and another face appeared. It was the wicked face of an ancient crone, untouched by time. It emanated hatred. I hid behind the armchair, and Gertrude screamed in terror, unable to tear her gaze away from the witch. When I peeked out from my hiding place, I saw flames bursting from the mirror, scorching Gertrude's porcelain skin. I heard the roar of the flames and the wicked laughter of the witch, who reached out for my stepmother. Gertrude, Bloody Mary howled. Come to me, Gertrude. She seized Gertrude and crushed her in her hands. Gertrude's scream of horror suddenly cut off. The flames disappeared as suddenly as they appeared. When I emerged from behind the armchair, neither Gertrude nor Bloody Mary was there. The next morning, I called my father to tell him that Gertrude hadn't spent the night at home. Well, that was true. He wasn't pleased. He quickly called some of his friends and found out that Gertrude had been seen with another man. Or, to be more precise, with several men. My father could forgive anything but infidelity. He immediately flew home to have a serious talk with Gertrude, but she never showed up. Everyone assumed she had run away with one of her lovers. Anyway, my father managed to divorce Gertrude and didn't even try to find her. And since she had no one else besides us, everyone agreed with the official version of what happened, and no one tried to look for her. Gertrude disappeared forever, and my father and I were finally safe.